Good afternoon. Okay, this is the audience participation portion of the program. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Great. We're going to have some fun here. My name is Robert Moore, and this is one of the subjects that I talk about. We'll go through it a little bit to make sure this works. There we go. First of all, before I get into myself, because, I like talking about myself, before I get into that, this is what we're going to talk about today, okay? We're going to talk about, first of all, the difference between Generation Z and Millennials, okay? Because there is another generation out there that's entering the workforce, okay? So we're going to talk about the differences between those two generations and how that affects business owners like yourself. We're also going to talk about the 4 challenges that affect, I'm going to call new generations, and I'm going to lump them together, the millennials and Gen Z together in that kind of conversation. So we're going to talk about the 4 challenges they have, and then what can we do about it, okay? So this is me. Actually, that's me on the right. I also referee football, so my season's over. My legs have about had it running on those fields, trying to keep up with all those younger kids. Okay, there was a time when I was the fastest guy in the state. I played 7th in the state, and there was a time. This time is way in the past. Much faster than I am. I own Big Penguin Worldwide, and it's a company that actually teaches Millennials, Gen Z, those things that are not taught in high school. Putting a budget together. Things like the importance of doing a daily habit. Okay, those type of things. I have a bachelor's degree in drama from the University of Washington and MBA. So I'm one of those weird people that uses both sides of my brain. I sit on the board for the National Boy Scouts of America, so I get all this data regarding millennial moms and those groups, because those people have kids right now that are in Cub Scouts growing up. So I have all this data that hopefully I'm going to share some of that with you today. And then I've been married for 24 years. I have 2 children. My daughter, who happens to be right over here, Madison, we're going to talk about her for a little bit, and my son, who's 19. Now, the interesting thing about the 2 of them is, while they're only 4 years apart, they're 2 different generations, which sounds completely weird, right? My daughter, Madison, again, 23 years old, she went to Shoreline Community College, because they offered animation as a degree, and they were one of the few in the state that actually have the right software to do that, similar to what Pixar does. And she did a full year of community college, then got to a certain class that she needed to have for this particular software, and there wasn't enough kids for the class, so the college didn't offer it. So now she's out of cycle. And now she's in the point, why am I doing this? Why would I want to spend another year of college when I'm not getting what I need out of it? Going right back to what Danielle said. So she said, I'm out of here, okay? Fortunately, with only $8,500 in student loans, okay? My son, his name's Wrighton, he just got offered a full-time position with Funko. He's in distribution, went straight out of high school, working for them as a contract worker, no benefits, don't get paid for holidays because a contract worker, and just got hired on full-time. He actually has 2 jobs, and now we're in that position of, do I get rid of the second job, because now I'm making enough money in the first job. And I keep telling him, you have to move out first. Okay, make enough money to move out. Now, you may wonder why there are 2 pictures of New York on the screen, okay? Because to me, this is what defines the generations. There are all the regular, okay, you're born between this date and this date. My daughter, okay, she was 4 or 5 years old when 9/11 happened. So she has a vague memory of the towers. we all have that thought, I'm sure most of us in this room saw the second plane hit the second tower, right? Okay. It's a shared experience. And when you have a shared experience, that defines your generation. Does that make sense? Okay. My son, he was less than a year old. He's not part of that generation. He'll never know a world without TSA. Right? He'll never know a world without the iPhone. Okay, because he was 7 when it came out. Okay. For him, it's always been in existence. There's always been an iPhone, right? He's never going to know a world where I go to the wall to answer the phone because I'm tethered to it. Okay? And if I want privacy, I go into the closet. Right? That's the privacy line. Until you hear the click, click. Mom, get off the phone! Okay? I'm sorry, you may not understand this. I apologize. Okay. All right. Because I'm sorry, but besides my daughter, you look like the youngest person in the room. 26. Okay. So I apologize if we're going to pick on you a little bit. So again, we're defined by those what I call prayer events. Events where everybody, regardless of what religion you may be affiliated with, we're all in kind of a group prayer moment. 9/11 was one of those, right? For me, it was the Space Shuttle Challenger. Okay? I was a senior in high school. I was going to be an astronaut. I was a Navy junior ROTC. I was the company commander. I had just received my Navy ROTC scholarship, full ride. And in January 1986, I am in the gym. They put a screen this size up in the gym because Sally Wright, teacher, was going up. And a minute and 47 seconds in, they're gone. That event changed my life. It was one of those prayer moments as a country. There are those of you in this room that remember when Kennedy was assassinated. Okay? You remember exactly where you were when you found out. Right? That's the boomer generation. Now there's one event that kind of splits those. And that's April 14th, 1970. Does anybody know what happened on April 14th, 1970?
Earth Day.
You're close? Yes.
Land on the moon.
Well, that was in 69. So April 14th, Jack Swigert stirred the tanks, and there was an explosion on Apollo 13. That's the one time when the world got together in prayer for the return of those astronauts. Okay? Fortunately, there was no tragic event that happened because of that. But that's the one that's kind of that, yeah, you remember the landing on the moon, but that one actually affected the world. You had a question?
No, just a statement about landing on the moon.
Go ahead.
I feel like everybody was glued to the TV.
Absolutely.
Right? You know, it's just like
Worldwide.
worldwide.
Yes.
I mean,
You could be in Timbuktu, and the one television screen that got the signal, okay, we used to have antennas on with tinfoil, okay? And you kind of,
Rabbit ears.
okay, we got the signal, don't move. Okay.
so it seemed like that was more of a shared experience.
Yes, it is a shared experience,
Like
yeah.
the landing on the moon.
Yeah.
The 1970s.
Yeah.
So anyway.
It's one of those just, yeah, because they're so close to each other. That's the one kind of exception to that rule. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment, okay? Of course, World War II, and World War I, those tragic events. Can you, I recall my grandfather, okay, was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1961. He was actually stationed on the Oklahoma. He happened to not be on ship because it was his birthday. Yeah, it was his birthday. So he had, the day before, taken leave to be off the ship. Or I wouldn't be here today. Can you think of 4 years of newsreels and movie theaters where you're seeing what's going on? Okay? Yeah, you had to wait to get the news back then, okay? All right? And of course, World War I, the Great Depression. So when we talk about millennials and Gen Z, there is some big differences between some of them. First one is, do you trust your employer? Okay? And this all comes from a Gallup survey. Millennials, 62% trust their employer. With Gen Z, you're right. With Gen Z, it's 49%. Why do you think there's a big difference?
Cell phones and online communications.
Yeah, that's part of it. Think of what happened. My son was 8 years old when we had the Great Recession. You see people lose their job, lose their home. Do you think you have any trust of employers, having gone through that experience? No. That's why. So, salary, a primary concern. Now, this is really not any different between all the generations. They all have kind of the same thing. But much more so from Gen Z. Why? Because they're trying to move out of the house. Just like any generation's trying to move out of the house. So they're much more realistic with regards to these concerns. Millennials use Facebook, right? Gen Z, anything but Facebook. Okay? Why? Because that's what my parents use. I don't want to use what my parents use. I want to use anything else but Facebook. Right? Student loans. Okay? This is a recent number, $38,390 in student loans on average, of millennials coming out of college with. Okay? That's a nice car. More than a nice car. Okay? My son saw what happened to my daughter and said, why the hell would I want to do that? And that's why he went straight into the workforce. I don't want to get stuck with that debt. Right? You're seeing that kind of a difference, but it affects the education level of that generation coming up. And so there has to be a supplement to that. Conversations. Text. Hello? Right? Now we have emojis. Now, did you know that, you see this one with the hands like this? What does that mean?
Thank you.
It means high five. Yes, everybody uses it at a prayer one, but it means high five. Yeah. Okay, now you know. My son, okay, and that entire generation prefers face-to-face conversations. That doesn't mean they're in the same room. They're FaceTiming their friends or their girlfriends constantly. Right? Okay? Because if you have a child right now, they will not know a world where they can't see the person they're talking to. Right? Yeah. How many people have done a job interview over online with a camera? See? Yeah. More. And I'm sorry, there's not a clock in this room, so somebody's going to tell me when I've got 10 minutes left. Okay, just so I can make sure I get all these slides. Millennials, a little over half of them, have more than one job. Does that surprise anybody? No, right? For millennials, They have a side gig. Gen Z, yeah, sorry. Gen Zs have a side gig, right? You have a side gig, right? There's Uber or Lyft or there's Grubhub, and what's your side gig?
I do photography.
Photography, there you go, see? Yeah. My daughter makes cupcakes. Very nice looking cupcakes, yes. Yeah, they have a side gig, okay? Their own thing, not working for another employer, but their own thing, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Online, they're always buying stuff online. For a Gen Z, if you can't do it on your phone, it doesn't exist, right? If you post a job application online, is it ready for them to use on their phone to apply for it? Because if it's not, you're missing out on a whole group of people. Brands. Okay, millennials like brands. I saw somebody with their Kate Spade purse. Yes, right? See?
Thank you for thinking about that. I'll take it.
And this is not uncommon with generations before. There was the establishment and then there was the non-establishment, right? So for Gen Z, it's the anti-brand. So my son likes Under Armour. Okay, now you think that's kind of the anti-brand to Nike. Okay? Because he likes Steph Curry. And Steph Curry chose Under Armour because he was able to put a biblical phrase on his shoes. That was the reason he chose, because Nike wouldn't do that for him. Okay? Yeah, Philippians 4:13. Nobody knows what that is off the top of their head.
When I was a child, I played with toys and I put toys away when I became an adult.
No, through all things.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Through all things, that's the beginning of the phrase. But that's kind of the anti-establishment. But that's common with all generations. You look back, that's kind of what everybody's kind of the anti-generation. Half of millennials experience a lockdown in their schools. 10 minutes already? Really? I've got like an hour's worth of stuff left. Okay. God, deal with it. Okay. 82% experienced a threat in yeah, right. Okay. So obviously, they all need security in the workplace. Okay. But millennials, or excuse me, the Gen Zs crave flexibility because they have that side, right? They crave the flexibility. Yes.
Can you remind me how old Gen Zs are?
Good question. Gen Z's, the definition is anybody born after 1997. That's kind of the social anthropologic phrase of that. So, okay, let's do this really quickly. Presidential trivia time. Okay. Right? Right? Who was born first? John F. Kennedy or Ronald Reagan?
Kennedy.
Reagan, by 6 years. But they're both part of the silent generation. I'm sorry, greatest generation. Thank you. Greatest generation, yes. Okay? So who's born first? Donald Trump or Bill Clinton?
Trump.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, George W. Bush was born in between these two dates. You have 3 presidents, all born in 1946. What happened in 1946? The end of World War II, right?
Knew lots of
They're all the very beginning of the boomer generation, right? Okay? So then what generation does Obama belong to?
Generation
When was he
X.
born?
Generation X. Oh, baby boom.
Yeah, he was born in 1961. He's the tail end of the baby boomer generation. So Kennedy had not been assassinated yet, right? He was born 2 years prior to his assassination. Okay, so he remembers the landing on the moon. He was 8 years old. Okay, right? So, okay, so we're short on time. This is usually my audience participation portion of the program, and we're going to do this just because we want to have fun. So this is kind of a list of all the presidents and the year they were born. And as you can see, we have the greatest, the silent, the boomer generation. Nobody from Gen X, nobody from my generation. And I'm going to say this right now, there will never be a president from my generation. Why? We don't have a big enough voting bloc. There's only 40 million of us. There's 70 million of the boomer generation. There's 75 million of millennials, and there's 80 million Gen Z. We don't have the voting bloc to vote ourselves a president. Never happened. And unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's getting too political. But if you look at the candidates currently in the lead for the presidency, you think of Trump, boomer. You think of Elizabeth Warren, boomer. You think of Bernie Sanders, boomer. You think of Joe Biden, boomer. If millennials ever figured it out, they could vote in the president. Because by laws, by the Constitution, as long as you're born prior to 1985, you can be president. Yeah, 35 years old. There's lots of them.